Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and in the diaspora, and welcome once again to Moving Forward, to this Choice television channel. In fact, I should have said, where else but Choice? Before we get into the nitty-gritty of what I have to say tonight, I want to say that one of our ministers is not too well. She had sudden pains from what I've gathered, and the government could not tell you that she was suffering from this, that, or the other. However, she is now going to be given the medical treatment that she needs. Those who know more about the science of medicine will tell us. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, we want to send our heartfelt feelings to the family. But other than that, let us wait until we hear exactly what, and not jump to conclusions to the extent where one particular newspaper is making the statement that the government should tell the people. What can the government tell the people? The government themselves don't know. So I just want to say, let us not jump, too quickly. Look before we leap. And with this, I want to say now, let us pray to the One Most High. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. O Father in heaven, we come to you tonight after celebrating our 45th year of independence. O Father, give our government the grace and strength they need to say finally that we are becoming a republic, because then many of us will know that the suffering of this country under the colonial government per se will be over. I believe that the Prime Minister wants to do so, or to move. That's why he has moved to the Caribbean Court of Justice. And it is only a matter of time, I'm sure, before that final decision is taken. However, give him the help and strength to fight off the cobwebs that still exist among those who thought that colonialism had a conscience. Oh, Father, I ask you to bring them out of the darkness and into the light, to have been for the darkness which they have been in for so long, and into that bright sunlight. We thank you, O Lord, for giving us Philip Joseph Pierre, Joseph, to be our leader, a man of humility and integrity. Some may not know this about him, but you do, and I do also. Oh, Father, I put my faith and trust in you, and believe without a doubt that you are the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Amen. Tonight, I quote from Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 to 48. You have heard that it was said, love your friends, hate your enemies. But now I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may become the sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun to shine on bad and good people alike, and gives rain to those who do good, and in those who do evil. Why should God reward you if you love only the people who love you? Even the tax collectors do that. And if you speak only to your friends, have you done anything out of the ordinary? Even the pagans do that. You must be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Tonight, I don't intend to hold back, as the title of this program is that we can lead by example, and we want the leaders that can do so. I choose this title because I'm simply appalled by the behavior and attitude of the leaders of the United Wreckers of the Poor. So tonight, I have no intention of holding back my views and comments, more so when it deals with the opposition. I just ask you to bear with me and to have patience in what is to unfold. I want to emphasize that if I think this present government was going down the wrong way, the wrong path, and doing things I did not like, as I have mentioned in terms of the vendors and reasonableness, the advice that has not been looked into properly and is now being done, then I would pull away from a dry and dust political party or society. But thankfully, this is a listening government. And in my view, compared to the last, the United Records of the Poor clearly do not fit the role of a loyal opposition, such as the one we would normally expect to see in a democratic country. What they fail to understand or realize is that the features of a loyal opposition party includes conceding defeat after losing an election, yet holding on to the policy positions and ideals. They do not include launching fierce fights between ruling party and opposition, more so in what we have been witnessing in the House with the leader of the opposition. This is without a doubt unwarranted and simply disgusting. What I would hope is that the opposition would instead be conscientiously overseeing government policy in the hope of proving itself and eventually returning to power. At present, the United Records of the Poor has adopted a scorched earth boycott strategy in the legislature, making it unintelligible to meet the standard definition of a loyal political opposition. As things stand, there seems to be no chance of this situation improving anytime soon, because it has become a tradition for the opposition to act disloyal, especially the leader, when they are out of office. The leader and the higher echelon of the party and the poodles of that party, that is their mentality. What I now say to them in all sincerity is to remember the beautiful words we hear in literature so often, and that is, for whom the bell tolls. I said to them in all sincerity that it tolls for you, the United Records of the Poor. Your leaders and mostly his crew are that way inclined. So tonight I want to express to you why that bell tolls for them. To the extent you will be in the garden of the doom and gloom, that is the United Records of the Poor, and will not even get a look in what is termed the Garden of Gethsemane. Let me make it clear that as things stand globally, and with the economic problems that we have been seeing over the past few years, with the Ukraine war and the Hamas-Israeli war, this has made everyone's life more difficult. So people are very angry. Political parties are at each other's throats in a lot of democratic countries right now. However, when one looks at our size, we should have been able to sort out our difficulties and try to work together and cooperate together. But we cannot. Why? Because the opposition cannot do so, as they are simply desperate to get back into power. So they resort to lies, intimidation, misinformation, disinformation, cyber warfare, and if necessary, they use artificial intelligence, AI. They are seen by many as being disloyal to the country because they have an opposition and deputy leader that the people have rejected resoundingly. That is what they cannot accept from the people. And no doubt, if they continue in the manner that they are doing right now, they will be there. That is, the government will be there for a very long time to come. However, it seems as if their money has not dried out or dried up with the numerous radio stations and programs we see on our phones, which is called United PAC, question, therefore, is where all this money is coming from. So I say to the special prosecutor to get off your backside, so to speak, and let us see some work in that direction. It is sad when one sees the strange death of the United Workers' Party, which Sir John brought to the people, to the one we now call the United Wreckers of the Poor. It is without a doubt a sad state of affairs. What is clearly visible is that this unfolding conundrum is happening before our very eyes. And it is not a pleasing sight. In my view, it is hard to understand when the wickedness and the snares of the devil has fully engulfed that party. We seem to want power at all costs, or they do, regardless whether they have to cheat, lie, or to spread alarm and despondency in this beautiful island of ours. The ideolated leadership comedy we are now seeing is very alarming when one considers the charisma and strength of the man who began that party and who led it for many years, which was then a sight to behold. Now it is plunged into the garbage of history, where it will be hard to ever resuscitate. Therefore, whatever new force will someday arise in that party, we shall not see the Sir John's form of leadership ever again. Therefore, nowhere in the passage of our history can we say and answer without a doubt that the bell tolls more tellingly than in the press relations of that party before the 2021 elections. It was one that kept spitting out spurious lies and misinformation, as I've said before, disinformation, the cyber warfare we saw, and even now, as I said, artificial intelligence, which is simply being used in a psychological manner. I want to tell those in that party that our St. Lucian people are much wiser than they were 20 or 30 years ago. And it's at this juncture, I'll take my first break and I'll be back. Warming up as usual. Welcome back to Moving Forward. And I was talking about the United Wreckers of the Poor and the way they are today. And I'm saying that before the last election, it blasted away at Labour with its full artillery of its mighty followers and listenership, by daunting reported power, because they had all the reporters with them, and bottomless purse. But it was all to no avail. Why? Because the propaganda they tried to peddle about what they had achieved in government had no real substance or effect to it. Therefore, the beating they were given literally blew them out into the oblivion. The so-called leader was so ashamed he could not bring himself to the early sittings of the House. He was so tired. He needed a rest. He seemed perplexed and just could not come to grips to the realization that he was simply thrown out into the feces of the horses who were supposed to bring the sport of kings to this island of ours. I do hope that the smell was like a perfume to his rotten nose and his arrogant self. What that party Alan led failed to comprehend was that the times they were changing and that we are not morons and jackasses. And he, as he had said, and his poodles thought existed, and who began to take control of our people began to take control of their senses, and therefore began to see the woods from the trees. The leader of the opposition thought that between 216 and 221 that he could impose his own neurotic vision of society in the form of brainwashing the people. He brought fear to the country, more so if you did not support his party. In fact, he was prepared to starve you out of food or even a job. A clear example of that was during COVID-19 when Chris was arrested and the now Minister for Central Castries was warned about driving out with other cars because it would be seen as a gathering. Yet UWPs in yellow jerseys could move about freely. This was then the society we lived in. Alan has a very short memory, to have forgotten that when he took office, they cancelled everything that was in the pipeline and planned by the former Labour administration. Yet he has the gall to make it look as though it is this present government that is the culprit in failing to continue what they started, like the box at St. Jude. That party forgot that they had dismantled the garbage site in Vieux Fort to build a $13 million road for their Sport of Kings. The garbage had to be transported to Deglo every day at a huge cost. Alan, I can go on and on about your waste of taxpayers' money. Because you seem to have forgotten that the dismantling of the executive suite and simply left the country with nowhere to put those arrested and waiting to go to court. Not only that, the dismantling of the old prison, which was unique and could have been turned into a tourist site to visit. They could then see the way prisoners were treated under colonialism that had the conscience. This, to me, was completely destroyed and turned into ashes. That is why at the last elections, I campaigned vigorously with the Labour Party for a new ethics in our politics. I was aware that if we had continued with the last government, we would have returned to the period of the divine rights of kings, because colonialism had a conscience that had bled the Caribbean, Africa, and India dry. What we saw with the leader of the opposition shenanigans in the House was a clear example of not understanding the rules of the House. He was only about party interest. He without a doubt showed contempt for our democracy, in my view. The leader of the opposition, instead of abiding by the laws of the land and the House, as when he was Prime Minister, used the Constitution in making life easier for himself and his poodles. We must never forget about this, or his action in terms of the Deputy Speaker of the House. What upset me is that this individual even thought he was PM right now, that he had not been thrown out. It was his main poodle who called the shots. They were both intolerant of dissent, even after the landslide loss. They still control their party to the hilt, more so now. One is leader and one is deputy leader. This reprobate, dismantle the rules and regulations of his party in terms of the amount of individuals, as has been alleged, who should have been involved in the party decision-making in every constituency, to the bare minimum before being made leader. The idea of becoming leader would not have happened if the rules and regulations, in my view, of the party were not altered. Here he is, behaving as a big spoiled brat. What made me laugh to my heart's content was when he thought that he should be the last one to make his presentation to the House. What a reprobate when your presence in the House is negligible. However, he found it very difficult to impose his own curious morality upon the unruly country that he had a hand in making. He must have then come to the realization that he no longer could spread fear, loafing, and mistrust in the country anymore. He also came to the realization that nothing worked, and what was instilled in the voters was cynicism, which seeped out day after day every time he opened his mouth before the election. I'm sure after his efforts to have tents at polling station fell apart, more so when the police voted and over 90% cast their lot with the Labour Party. That then, without a doubt, spelled doom and gloom for his party. It is all these, at this juncture, I now say to them, in all sincerity, that they should all return to their very own never, never land in perpetuity, and never to return again. I say this to you, St. Lucians, here and in the diaspora. I've come to the stage in my life when I am of the view that in St. Lucia we must make every effort to stop people like the leader of the opposition feeling ever about getting back to lead our country again. Our country should be of the people and for the people, and even by the people, in making our lives and the country a better place, not only for those here today, but for those to come. The animal antics behavior we have seen from Alan Chastanet in the House is, in my view, unacceptable and a damn shame, and is an example that we should be making of him today. This individual is, in my view, a big spoiled brat who has no regard for the black people of this country. Yes, I said black. Here is a reprobate who has simply no respect for those who run the House of Assembly, regardless whether it is those he put there when in government. We must never forget that in his time, he nominated 2 speakers of the House, and yet he had no respect for them and simply refused to abide by their order. To one of them, he said, in a clear and concise voice, and very angry mood too, when he was asked to apologize because of his habit of calling other members liars, he simply refused. His answer after he was asked 3 to 4 times was simply, I will not. And you can do what you want. St. Lucia, you forget that? He was never thrown out of the House when he should have been, and never be allowed back until he apologized. And further to that, some of his pay should have been deducted to that extent. This guy fails to realize that he is not representing himself, but the people of Micoud South. On another occasion, the present speaker asked him again to apologize, and he simply refused. Not too long ago, and packed up his bag and left the House. Recently, we had the deputy speaker because the normal speaker was out sick, and again he was asked to abide by the rules and regulations. He simply refused again. And when the deputy speaker insisted, he packed up his belonging and left the house in a rage once again. How much longer can we continue to accept those animal antics? I don't even have the energy to speak about Leon, his first speaker, who on several occasions had a run-in with this individual, and who, in my view, should never be in our House of Assembly. This is the guy who said openly that he was a product of Canada. On the 13th of February, 2024, here is a guy who wants to convince us that he cares and that he's a St. Lucian, yet his passport, as the Prime Minister says, is Martinican. He was born not in St. Lucia, but Martinique, as quoted by the present Prime Minister. This individual, in my judgment, is not fit to lead a party here or in any other place in the world. I would simply like to know where he got his qualifications from, because he's nothing but a clown sometimes in terms of education or knowledge. Anyone who has any inclination of being a leader and does not act in the manner that the leader should, then as far as I'm concerned, he should not be in politics. It's at this juncture. I'll take my next break and I'll be back. Welcome back to Moving Forward. Now, I was talking about the leader of the opposition. And I believe that he thinks that he is in a totalitarian society and that his complexion maybe gives him power over the minions of this country. Well, I want to tell him that he once called people of this country, beautiful country, mendicants, jackasses, and barking dogs. I'll never let him forget. Well, in my view, he should know them, because he's their leader, he was, and a terrible one at that. As I've said before, I have no intention to mince my words after trying to stomach this individual's attitude in the House. He simply failed to understand that one leads by example and should be professional in his or her attitude and mannerism. He should be the change we would want to see. But that was not so, because the people of the country made it clear that they were dissatisfied with his government and party, because his leadership lacked the principles that were expected. However, he or this individual is all about causing serious tension. Every time he walks into the House now, he seems to like conflict. Why? Because he's not interested in the issues that are being discussed in the House. He just wants his presence felt, because it is a form of propaganda, so that when he leaves in the manner he does, the important, relevant issues that were discussed will be forgotten. All he's interested in and wants is for people to talk about his animal antics that he portrayed in the House, so that they can forget the serious debate that took place and what the bill was all about, especially if it is one that will bring success to the country, more so our youth, especially in this case. It's dealing with youth and skills, their skills for the future. He does not want to see that, because he has simply a warped mind. People around the world who were watching the comedy of what was unfolding in the House must now be laughing at our inept discipline in the House of Assembly. When an individual can continue to behave in that manner and no disciplinary action is taken against him, That individual then, as we have just seen, is no more than just as dry an institution, that is our institution, that I have ever seen. I know one thing. If I was the Speaker of that House, this behavior would simply not be tolerated, whether it is the government or the opposition. This individual should have been kicked out and be escorted by the police to make sure he doesn't return before an apology. Having said this, there are one or two in the government side that I would not tolerate either in their behavior. But give them their due. They've always apologized in good faith. As many of you know, I don't mince my words, and therefore, as I've always said, truth must be forever on the throne. The leader of the opposition, in my view, does not have a clue what real leadership is about, and therefore he's not even aware that we must lead by example once again, and that any change we want to see, we have to work for it by convincing those who are part and parcel of the change that will be taking place. That starts by being clear about what we really stand for and the principles that we espouse and use in our judgments and decisions, both individually and collectively. Therefore, without a doubt, we need to be proactive and plan ahead to shape the development we need in the country so that we can determine the future and not just react to it. What we do should be a force for good, but it needs to act we need to act with integrity, to be more transparent, and to take the lead on tolerance and acceptance. True leaders must now become aware that the world at present seems to be becoming even more unpredictable, and therefore we should be shifting focus from the things that makes us different to the things that bind us together. And that starts with each one of us. Prime Minister, I want to say quite categorically to you that people now want their voices heard more so in the redevelopment of the Castries Town Centre, where the little man or woman is trying to make a living to survive. In what is taking place at this juncture, we want to see a plan of the redevelopment process. It is without a doubt a huge decision when what is taking place have highlighted some tensions in attitudes and beliefs and the different realities that people experience, more so that of the vendors. But I know you're doing your best right now, and people are applauding you for that. Therefore, I'd like to see a referendum on that matter, thereby giving everyone a voice. However, it is one where they should use it to express satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the plan, whatever the outcome. I therefore reiterate that people want their voices to be heard, and perhaps this is the time for wider change and consultation in how those voices get heard in our political processes. Yes, the center of Castries need change. That's a fact. Therefore, it is without doubt times of uncertainty for us, and therefore we all tend to take a stock of what we must all take a stock of what is really important to us and look for security and safety. The important thing to remember in all of this is that our tolerance for differences can quickly diminish, and sadly, we have seen too much of this during 2016 to 2021. There is no doubt whatsoever. These are the challenging times for creating positive connections, engaging people and giving them a voice and reinforcing inclusivity and security, more so in this country when it deals with their business, which are their workplaces, and which without a doubt is important to them. Ladies and gentlemen of St. Lucia, I want once again to remind you all of something I spoke about many moons ago. At that particular juncture in time, I thought that if it could be achieved then, our country would be moving on in its development. The envy and become the envy, and malice that is so prevalent will gradually disappear, and a rebuilding process will take place. One that should embrace all that is for the good of the country as a whole. Therefore, I want you to remember this piece in a song I again relive day in and day out. And it says, if you give a little more than you take, and help a stranger in the rain, and if you stand up for those down on their knees, and lend a voice to those who cannot speak, there is a place for people like you. And I hope it is heaven. I put this forward tonight because in this hypocritical world we live in, one of the pretense we have to contend with is where those you think are friends are sometimes enemies. Therefore, what we are seeing in this country of ours, more so among the United Records of the Poor, is hatred and malice towards the government, more so at the Prime Minister, whom they try to belittle and mock. Why? Because he's doing what is right by the grace of the One Most High, and it is working. They simply resent this because they literally want to see him fail. They are simply not concerned about the growth of St. Lucia on the whole, but of their lousy self-interest. Therefore, there is a jealousy, malice, and an envy that have become their signature tune. When this cannot be achieved, their leaders, together with some high-ranking individuals of the party's trademark, which is the party's trademark, is to attack the Prime Minister from all angles, and in trying to put him in a bad light. However, that is failing, as I've said before, because many St. Lucians are now wise with the opposition's ploy, which is bent on hell and destruction. Their sole purpose is to regain power at all costs, and therefore they will try every trick in the book in wanting to see the Prime Minister, Philip Joseph Pierre, fail. However, God is with him and in him. I said to Alan, something is more important, and that is to instill into his straw-filled head that God created us as equals, not to be used by one another. What he and the people like him who have had a taste of power simply forget it, and it is important to keep reminding them of this. Therefore, I take this opportunity in making a particular quote that should resonate with them in a godly way, and that is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. When the leader of the opposition fails to realize this, that he has no power or authority over anyone because of his complexion or his father's money, he is without a doubt an overgrown, spoiled brat, especially when one sees his display from the time he was a minister of tourism. We must never forget what he told us about boxing in paradise, which cost this country a fortune, so much money that we did not have, and was a complete failure. He was the same one who told us that the DSH program would not be profitable, yet he was spending huge sums of money on the sport of kings that we did not have the money for. He was such a liar. He went on to try and convince the public that it will bring investment to the country. From where? What poppycock? Because it did not. And it cost us a small fortune. This is the same man who told us that the country was broke, and it did not have money. What we are seeing from the opposition leader and his team of poodles and jackasses is sheer deception. Cunning, because they think that they can get away with it. One can see that beneath their cry there is an attitude and pretense which is thoroughly disguising their evil ways. When I look at the leader of the opposition in the House, he simply showed that he had that ego, that he's superior to others, when he should be at the bottom of the ladder, because everyone in there is better educated to an extent. He simply believed that the rules of the House do not apply to him. Once again, I blame the Speaker or speakers we have had. We need to bring about some decorum to the House. We have to do things fairly and justifiable, and cannot be disrespectful in our behavior. We cannot have different rules for different people. When Alan Chastaner's government was in power, what they simply looked for was that their government and party could remain cozy and safe in their very own never land. They did everything and anything in their power to hold on to office. We all know that. We can still see it. They even went to the extent that in order to keep power, they were allegedly trying their best to buy votes in order to stay in power. However, many were wise to their ploy. I therefore say to the Labour government to take note of that and don't repeat their mistakes. Remember, Prime Minister, your promise of working on the minimum wage or living wage in this country. Many people have met me and spoken to me about this, more so at some huge supermarkets. Some say that at times, after paying their bills, they have very little to pay bus fares to get to work or to get something to eat. That simply cannot be just and fair. While those that work or they work for are making simply huge profits and are able to open other supermarkets around the world. At present, I can see that the government is now focusing on the bigger picture in forms of extending our education system to take in the skills that are now needed in order to attract future investment in the long run, which will have an impact on our unemployment and growth. That is my view. That, in my view, is focusing on the bigger challenges that we must and need to solve or face so as to rebuild the obvious and growing distrust with the establishment, more so the elite like the Prime Minister. What I would simply like to ask him once again is whether in his tenure as the Minister of Tourism and Prime Minister, did he ever get any hotels built in this country? I'll take another break and I'll be back with this. Welcome back to Moving Forward. And I was asking the last Prime Minister, when he was Minister of Tourism and Prime Minister, how many hotels did he build in St. Lucia? If so, tell us. Because I will say something to you, my dear friend. When compared to Philip Joseph Pierre, who in his time as Minister of Tourism built hotels, you didn't. I also want to know a simple question dealing with his past working record as to whether he left the job with, say, Air Jamaica, or did the late owner of Sandals let him go. I'm just curious and just putting my thinking cap on. When I heard the rumblings of Alan in the House in criticizing the government unduly, I have to ask the question as to what was he getting at in terms of meaning and purpose in his criticism of the government. In terms of planning, etc., I was simply lost for words, because it is then I truly came to the conclusion that this individual was a featherbrain and typical imbecile. In my view, this was an individual who did not have any idea of what planning is about, whether short-term or long-term. Someone must take on this opposition leader when he displays his animal antics, because much of his criticisms of the Prime Minister and government are frivolous and has no meaning to it. It is as dry as dust because it has no value to it. But something just keep blowing in the wind when he speaks. I therefore say to the Prime Minister that if we act boldly and decisively together, we can hope or shape the new St. Lucia our citizens want, and that we owe to the future generations. This will be, as far as I'm concerned, a just and humane and inclusive St. Lucia, one that is exciting, energetic and enterprising. It will indeed be to everyone's liking. What I've seen and heard from this leader of the opposition is nothing that is positive. And at times I often wonder what he washes his mouth with, because nothing good and worthwhile comes out of it. With this individual, there's always the prophecy of impending doom and gloom. In my view, he has without a doubt a decadent mind. Therefore, nothing good can come out of it. When I compare this reprobate to Philip J. Pierre, all I see is simply chalk and cheese. In Philip, I see a man who dared to imagine that the interests of humanity lay in the politics of genuine democracy and the philosophy of universal love. He has the willingness, that is, to listen to others with sincerity. The Prime Minister mentioned in the House quite emphatically that he does not know everything because he believes in listening and taking advice from those who know. He made it clear that he cannot say that about the leader of the opposition who thinks he knows it all. And in effect, he's a guru. Well, Prime Minister, in your case, you are correct, because 80% of communication is listening. The Prime Minister made it clear in saying, I need to concentrate on running the country, but cannot sit back and allow the member for Miku South to deliberately mislead the people of St. Lucia. He just cannot accept that he was rejected. That's the Prime Minister saying so. And therefore, he is without shape. The Prime Minister made the point that during COVID-19, St. Lucia had their 6th highest depression figures in the world because of poor mismanagement of the country. Yet the leader of the opposition has the guts to open his mouth about mismanagement of the country, of this government. In looking back, I can recall that much of the shortages of drugs, etc., took place under Alan's watch. And what annoys me is that some of the people involved in this fiasco are still on staff at a higher position of the medical institution. This, in my view, cannot be allowed to continue. There should be move elsewhere. Philip was rather philosophical when he said of the last Prime Minister that he thinks he knows everything, because he claims that he knows quite a few subjects or words to that effect. The PM mentioned that many people say to him, leave this man alone. In effect, leave him and let him talk crap. The PM made it clear that he would like to do that, but how can one, when the leader of the opposition keeps lying in the House, on United Park, their radio station, etc., where he continues those lies? The PM made it clear that after COVID-19 he left the country in a mess, and that will be his legacy to the country. That is why he was literally kicked out to the dustbin of history. Ladies and gentlemen, I do apologize because some of the words here are mine, and I don't want to attribute it to the Prime Minister. He was far more diplomatic than I am. However, he went on to say that while Alan was the Minister of Finance, he had an agreement with Monroe College in 2018. However, the program was in 2019. This program went on to train 128 students. What transpired was that after the training, the government then had not released any payment for providing 128 students with their certification. This, in theory, was a piece of dishonesty that cannot be tolerated, and the public has to know the dishonesty that took place under the last government. The Prime Minister may declare that $384,000 was owed to the bank towards the program course. Until that money had been received, certificates to the students could not be released. Therefore, getting employment in the hospitality center, especially on these big tourist ships, with their new qualification, was as dry as dust because they couldn't prove it. Therefore, this government, through the Minister of Finance in January 2024, had discussions in terms of the payment that was outstanding and the balance due to Monroe College for those 128 young students was going to be paid. Isn't that marvelous? To the extent this government will honor its obligation to settle the amount of $384,000. Yet the irony is that the leader of the opposition is asking this government as to what they were doing for the youth of the country and what they had put in place. Well, the rabbit is out of the hat in that they are paying the debt you left behind, Alan, because, like a thief in the night. To the leader of the opposition, this episode was simply pie in the sky. And what one would term flashing mirrors. Prime Minister, don't forget that word is yours. To him. And he did not pay the amount due. Can anyone believe that a Prime Minister of a country made an agreement to educate and give the country's youngsters new skills and simply did not pay the amount due? This, in my view, is dishonesty at the highest level. And this individual wants to come back as Prime Minister of this country. He wants to do so by the use of his party propaganda machine. The present Prime Minister may declare that we have to remain focused and to be able to debunk these lies that are being perpetrated by him and his cronies. The Prime Minister, in his speech in the House, went on to tackle the deliberate propaganda about the box that was being built to replace the original St. Jude Hospital. Well, it was quite revealing to the extent that the Prime Minister put the cards on the table and without a doubt debunked the statement that was being made consistently by the opposition, more so by the leader of the opposition. His so-called deputy made the point on a radio station that what they were building at St. Jude could be termed the state-of-the-art hospital. Yet, in my view, it is nothing else but a box. I went to see it. The Prime Minister may declare that there was no place for a kitchen, laundry facilities, offices, warehouses, etc. He didn't. Therefore, this government has gone back to the same older buildings in phase one. Last government's deliberate ploy to fool the people because election was upon them then. So they moved with haste to put up the box and call it a modern day hospital. In my view, they are without a doubt con artists who simply destroyed two newly built buildings costing between $7 to $9 million to accommodate that box. How can this be right? And I must say that I am somewhat disappointed with the so-called special prosecutor who seems to be in the never, never land. And we are hearing nothing from that office. This, in my view, is an urgent matter because a lot of money was involved since 2009. I have spoken to many people who feel the same and have simply lost faith in the individuals chosen to be the special prosecutor. I want to mention to him that this present government has now gone over 2 years and 6 months in office, and therefore the procrastination must come to an end because tide and time waits for no man. The Prime Minister made the point that the present opposition want us to suffer by having more crime, would like the road to get worse, and the effort the government is making to finish the hospital don't happen because of their sins. He made it clear that this year 2 areas will be completed. He was totally convinced that the opposition is praying for doom and gloom to put a block on the government's progress. The leader of the opposition had the audacity to say that the government had no plans for education. The Prime Minister in the House made it clear that these are the people, the same people who seem to have forgotten when our children were getting to school for half the day, until the Labour Party was the one who managed to stop this and brought about full education, which bringing on board more secondary schools, etc. He looked back on the days when common entrance was sat and only 100 students could have gone to secondary school because there was only 2, one for the girls and one for the boys. I was lucky too, but my parents had to pay a lot of money for lessons. It is like the SDA, he said, that came into being. He was, in a sense, looking back at the educational system we had. He made it clear when he said, I was one of them who went to college, then put it hard on paper for the poor parents because of the amount they had to pay for lessons, etc., as I just mentioned. I concur and know what it was like. Children from poor families had to sink or swim. Alan did not have to because, as allegedly reported, he was not bright. He moved from school to school, and in his time, until he left the country and went to Canada. At one time, there was simply no space for more students. And can you imagine how crime really starts in a small way? Because many children had only half a day in school, and the other half was getting into mischief. The Prime Minister highlighted that at Rock Hall, something beautiful will be happening very soon, but did not disclose. I will, without a doubt, be wanting to know as soon as it is possible to get the info. He made it clear that the leader of the opposition loves speaking untruths, and in my view, that seems to be his modus operandi. Alan, as expressed by the Prime Minister, that he was supposed to be the kind of things, all kinds of things, economist, financier, hotelier, etc. He has even given the impression that his qualification is in the range of subjects such as engineering, also had a mixed degree to that extent. And he's also a financier, as I said, economist and things of that sort. And basically a guru in everything. We remember a lot of another person who said the same thing, Trump. The Prime Minister made it clear that I don't know about everything because I am not perfect. What I can do is to listen to advice and also listen to people who know more than I do. And from that, I can make the best decisions for the future generation of the country. Yes, Prime Minister, that is true leadership in action. Not only that, the PM is putting everything in place in terms of the education so that every home will be able to have one graduate among them. It is not perfect, but it is a beginning, which the last government would never have thought of because they were more interested with their family, friends, and foreigners. Before ending, I want to ask the last Minister of Infrastructure why he's so concerned about the Soufriere Port Development Project, because GPH is dealing with it and not SLASPA. My simple question, as alleged, is that he is a member of the infrastructure. Again, as has been alleged, virtually controls SLASPA and quite possibly still have ties with the institution. Can that be true? Because that is what is being bandied about. This guy made the statement on a program that by giving GPH the contract dealing with the port of Soufriere, that this is a threat to our democracy. because LASPA has the capacity, and therefore the country will be better off. He even went on to talk about the HIA project, which this government seems as if they want to return to that previous deal. In returning, the PM concluded his speech in the House with these words: many people know of the skills shortages in the OECS. The World Bank, in their report, said that in the Caribbean, 40% of all employers in St. Lucia indicated that skills and education of workers was a hindrance to the country's competitiveness. 61% of youth in the OECS face challenges in getting or earning a living. Many youngsters are facing these challenges because their academic qualification did not fit the labor market. That is why this borrowing in the House seeks to cure. Once again, I end this program by making it clear that I will not stand by and allow my country and the future of the children and later grandchildren be allowed to go down the drain because of the inefficiency of any government. I'm happy and proud to say, regardless of the lies and propaganda of the last government and now opposition, that the present government is working very hard to bring the country back on course, as it was left in an abysmal state from whom I term Humpty Dumpty, who usually sat on a wall telling us how great he was. But that greatness was to do with family, friends, and foreigners. Under his leadership, we went backward 20 years. However, some did benefit, and that is about 10% of his alleged people or followers. He must never run this country again, nor some of his poodles that still surround him. I once again call on all St. Lucians to let us rise up with a greater determination and readiness to make St. Lucia a better country, not only for those here at present, but as I have said many times before, for those to come. Therefore, I thank the Holy Father for allowing me to be here with you and being able to appeal to all who truly love St. Lucia and want to see it develop into the talk of the Caribbean because of its development. I know that we can do it with Philip Joseph Pierre. Let us give him all the help and strength he needs to overcome the adversities that can arise from the global world we are now a part of. I thank you once again for listening. As always, I have tried to be honest in everything I have said tonight. So go in peace to serve the One Most High. And never forget that he made you in his own image and likeness, and that you were born black, and you should be proud of that. Go, brothers and sisters, in peace and the love of the One Most High. Goodbye and good night for now. Good night.